everyone. I'm Jeremy Geffen, Executive and Artistic Director of Cal Performances, and it's my great pleasure today to have with me pianist, Hammond B-3 organist, and composer, Matthew Whitaker. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us today. I wanted to start out by saying, acknowledging, first of all, that you have an extraordinary amount of achievements for someone who I don't think has yet broken 20 years of age. Is that correct?
Oh, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I am 19 years old, so I guess what you said, yeah, it works. Yeah, but yeah. I mean, thank you so much for that compliment. Thank you.
Um, I don't know many 19-year-olds who have two albums of their own and others' compositions out, and who maintain such an active touring schedule. And as it turns out, you are touring while you are still a student, if I understand correctly.
Yes, that is correct. I am currently studying at Juilliard. It is located in New York, but since this pandemic is going on, I've been doing online classes, and it's my second year at the program.
And if there is any school in the country that understands the needs of the performing artist, it would be Juilliard. So I assume they've been very accommodating with the schedule of live
Yeah.
events that at least leading up to the pandemic.
Yeah.
So I wanted to first of all say how exciting it was to listen into the session that we recorded of you and your quartet a few days ago,
Thank
and
you.
wanted to ask you what this pandemic has meant for your music making, whether you've been able to get together with your quartet members, whether you've been able to compose, if there have been unexpected upsides that have come out of this, or what sort of feelings this has left you with.
Well, I mean, it's a whole new learning experience for all of us, right? Especially coming from an artist's point of view, because um, one, there's no audience. Two, well, there's audience, but it's virtual, and like your energy has to be on point, and that's something that me personally, I'm still trying to, get down pat. But I feel like with the more performances I do virtually, the more comfortable I become. And, I hope my music, brings joy and happiness and peace to what's currently going on in this crazy time we are in.
Well, I can say for certain that it does, and that if you had any concern that there would be a flag in your energy without an audience present, I certainly didn't witness it. It was really inspiring and very up. I wanted to ask you about your quartet members and how you came together, how long you've been
Yeah.
performing together for.
Um. So, one of my friends, actually, we all know him. Well, we all, as in the quartet, we all know this guy. Uh, he's one of our friends who plays drums in another band. Who introduced me to uh my guys, basically. And we got together in the end of December in 2018. Yeah, in 2018, and we had our first get together and rehearsal, and our first show was that next month in January. So but yeah, I mean, it's been an amazing experience with these guys ever since that first rehearsal, and it is Kareem Hutton on bass, Isaiah Johnson on drums, and Marcos Robinson on guitar.
Well, it's a really impressive group, and I wanted to ask about that relationship that develops, because
Yeah.
so much of jazz is give and take and the balance between
Everyone.
sections you've worked out together and those moments of improvisation. So how has your relationship with those musicians deepened over the course of, I guess, nearly the last 2 years?
Yeah. I feel like uh, like you mentioned, like the relationship, especially with in regards to jazz playing, um, you know, that has been definitely getting stronger, you know, ever since the first rehearsal. And I feel even now, we are still growing, as a group, which is always good.
You clearly up each other's game, which is one of the great things about working with people on a regular basis, that you know how to take each other to the next level, which is really beautiful to behold. But in you, they don't get just a pianist; they get a multi-instrumentalist. And in fact, in your setup behind you, I see that we have a Hammond B-3 organ, which is, I think, for many members of the audience who are watching this video, really really fascinating, because it's a similar setup to a piano keyboard, but it's also very different
True.
and really complicated. And I was wondering if you could take us through what the differences are between playing a piano, an electronic keyboard, and the B3.
Ooh. Good. Good question. Let's see. So with the piano, um, you know, um, you have the keyboard with you, and you can. It's very velocity sensitive, meaning that if you play a note softly, the note will come out soft. If you play more harder or with more force, the sound will get louder. Same with keyboards. I mean, there are many different types of keyboards. Some act exactly like a piano. Some are more different, depending on how it's made or what sounds it has. And with the organ, like you mentioned, it's totally different. So there's two sets of keyboards. You got foot pedals. You got all the controls on top of it, all the switches and drawbars as well. And um, and on top of that, there's also uh, a Leslie speaker, which is if you have seen it up close, it's basically a speaker that has moving parts, and it spins, and you can control how fast or slow um, the speed is, and on some models you can turn it off, and not have it spin at all.
One of the things that strikes me immediately is you can easily be in a situation where you have one hand on each keyboard and your legs moving, your feet moving simultaneously, and the athleticism of that, as opposed to sitting at a static keyboard per se.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really like, you know, it, you're really moving a lot, But I like to be moving a lot while I'm playing, because that that really helps with my energy and stuff, And same with drums, because I play drums as well, so it's like, again, a lot of movement going on. But
Among your many distinctions, you were the very youngest Hammond B3 official artist, as I understand it.
yeah.
Um, and I'm just imagining that, when you started playing the instrument, which was, I'm not sure at which age, but your legs probably were not long enough to hit some of those
The
foot pedals.
pedals. Actually, I think I was able to hit them. Um, I think. Yeah, yeah, I was. When I was 9 is when I taught myself the organ. Um, I was actually able to reach the pedals. But as I kept growing, it became more easier. But yeah, when starting out, I was able to hit him.
And what was it? Actually, why don't we take it one instrument at a time? What was it that drew you first to the piano? Was that something
Mm.
that was your idea? Was it something that your family wanted you to do?
My grandfather was the one who started all this. So, uh, you know, he wanted me to play music, and he, says, he said that he was gonna get me a drum to just to start out with, so I could just bang it, cause and it made noise, but he couldn't find one, so he got the small keyboard, and when I was 3, he gave me it, but um, yeah, and I taught myself nursery rhymes at the age of 3, and at 5 is when I started getting into classical piano. And I've been studying with my teacher, Dahlia Sakis, and today we are still working together on classical technique.
I saw on your list of favorite favorite artists, favorite composers that Bach and Chopin
Yeah,
made the list.
yes, they did.
Any particular works or?
I just, in general, their compositions are just really good. I mean, Bach is really good for piano, like fingering exercise, like fingering technique, and also Chopin too. But Chopin, I feel, has a totally different, style.
Absolutely, quite a lot. Well, there was a lot of movement in Bach, but
True.
different types of ornamentation.
Yeah.
And actually, now that I think about it, like Bach, you uh, play both the piano and the organ, and write for both.
Oh yeah.
Um, so, what was it that drew you to the sound of the B3?
Well, I think you meant I think you said it right there. The sound. One of the things I love about the B3 is the sound and just how expressive it can be, and the amount of sounds you can get just by using the drawbars or any of the other controls on the instrument, and uh, yeah, and I guess um, I love also the feel of the instrument, and how it's played, and you know, like I mentioned before, it's a lot of movement, so I like. I like using the pedals. I like using the two keyboards at the same time with my left foot, or both feet sometimes, depending on what I'm doing. But yeah, I mean, I guess those are the really the two main things I like. I love about the instrument.
And it's a sound that I think we become. Uh, it's a 20th century instrument that well, now a 21st century instrument. So, but I think we've
Yeah.
become very accustomed to hearing it in certain types of pop, R&B, in gospel music, and absolutely it is found in jazz quite a bit. Um, were there any particular performers that you look up to with that instrument in particular?
With the B3. Let's see. Well, I love, well, Dr. Lonnie Smith. He's one of my mentors. Um, we every time when we get a chance, we always go see him perform live, and he was one of the first organists I ever heard growing up, and I still listen to his music. But he really taught me how, like I mentioned before, the expression of the instrument and how expressive it can be. Um, I also love Jimmy Smith, all the Jimmys, Jimmy Smith, Jimmy McGriff, um, Charles Erland, Rhoda Scott. she is a great organist as well. She does a lot with her feet, with the pedals. So and so I learned a lot of from listening to her. I mean, there's a lot of organists. Joey DeFrancesco, he's an amazing one. Yeah. Tony Monaco. I mean, there's just so many. I'm sorry, but yeah.
And I know that there was a very important moment when when you opened for Stevie Wonder
Yeah.
was it at the Apollo Theater?
Yes, I was about 10 years old, I believe. Yeah.
Did you know much about Stevie Wonder at the time?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I've definitely listened to him a lot. On YouTube or in my on my phone a lot. Before then. But meeting him in person was an amazing experience. Like you mentioned before, I did open for him, and I did get a chance to meet before I had to go on stage. But he gave me one of his harmonicas as well.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
thank
Um,
you.
uh, it's a great pleasure to listen to you. You're clear. It sort of jumps across the speakers how much fun you're having.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
and then when we're able to watch you perform, that it's I would say you multiply that by a factor of 10 or 100. It's you're having the best time out there, and that absolutely comes through. So you're really still at the beginning stages of a career, although you've already accomplished so much. Are there things that are on your to-do list coming up, or things that you really want to do?
I mean, I just hope to continue to grow as an artist and to keep growing musically. Like I said before, I'm in Juilliard, so I'm learning a lot musically, and I hope to continue. And yeah, and just learn about what's the best way for me to accomplish tasks, from a blind person's point of view. But yeah,
And well, you've just mentioned accomplishing school from a blind person's point of view.
yeah,
I think many people aren't aware of the fact that there is a system of notated music that was developed by Louis Braille
yeah, about
himself.
music. Yeah,
Um, could you talk a little bit about what that is and
yeah, yeah, about music. It's basically so what happens is this is especially useful for when I'm doing classical work. Um, I would have the braille music on top of the piano, and basically what would happen is you would have one hand on the braille and one hand on the piano, and I would read each hand, and as I'm reading, I just play what's on the what's on the page, and then once I get those two parts down, I have to play them together and memorize it. So if we can imagine, it's a lot longer than a sighted person just coming up to the piano and reading a piece of sheet music. You can't just be okay. Here's one music and go.
yeah.
No. Um, that's why I prefer learning songs by ear. Um, but it is a good way of just checking to make sure you're playing everything correctly, especially in classical music. Although
Yeah,
you can do your own thing, but just make sure the the meat of the song is very similar, or if not, right, as 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 how the composer composed it. But yeah,
yeah. I was really curious because I learned a little bit about this recently. That, as you say, you need one hand to actually read the Braille. Obviously, a keyboard instrument takes two hands, so everything has to be worked out in advance and memorized. And it also seems that it's not a graphic notation as you would have in a printed score.
Right.
It's much more linear. So you're actually reading every bit of information and having to figure out where it sits. Like just the idea of writing out a chord.
Right. On top of that, Braille takes up more space than print, actually. So if you imagine uh, a piece of sheet music could be like a few pages, the Braille version would be even more pages.
Yeah, so memorization must be a huge part of what you of your process.
Yeah.
And when you compose, are you how do you compose? Do you is it notated through a program?
So how I compose? Good question. Honestly, I just play whatever instrument I feel like playing, and I just come up with ideas like that. Or I um like as I'm recording, even some ideas may come to me. Like for example, if I were to start out by recording drums, uh, while I'm recording that drum part, some ideas would come into my head, and I would just record them, and see, and I would have a final idea in my head as far as like what I want the other instruments to have. So or I want the other or like what I want the other instruments to sound like. So I would just you know while I'm recording stuff, ideas may come out. And you mentioned about the notation program. I do use that for transcribing music or um using it again to have more ideas. Uh, that is a program that allows a blind musician to uh, notate music uh, using a MIDI controller connected to a computer. So yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, I think uh, many people listening to this interview may not even be aware of the degree to which composition takes place on computers for any composer these days. There are many tools available, and probably the number of people who are uh, writing dots on pages has has diminished just because computer composition makes things as with almost anything else computers have touched more streamlined. Um, and what's fascinating to hear you speak about your composition process is that as you are laying down one track, you are mentally composing the other tracks in your head. So you're keeping all of the score developing simultaneously.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Sometimes, even when I'm performing live with my group, we come up with stuff on the spot, and it's like, oh, let's try that idea and see how that fits with this. Or but it may not fit, but let's try it anyway. And you know, but just things like that. Like very like on the spot improvising, and you know.
I've been really tickled by some of the themes you weave into your performances. I think at the moment that I tuned into uh, to the session last week, you were sort of taking a riff on the habanera from Carmen.
Yeah.
And in an earlier video of you that I'd watched, if I'm not mistaken, the Flintstones. Are these things that when you incorporate these themes or themes that are from the collective conscious from popular culture, as it were, is that something that you have planned out in advance, or does it just wind up being the destination on a road that you're planning out?
Uh, Both, really. Like sometimes, like I may plan certain things that happen during a song, you know, throw a quote in there, or like I said before, like improv on the spot. That just may come up like as I'm improvising on stage or something like that. You know, you may hear some other themes from somewhere, but yeah, I feel like it's both, both uh combination of planning and just sometimes it just happens, just like on stage.
And that actually leads me to the question of developing a set list
Mm.
for a specific performance, and the set list that you chose for this particular performance, which is a mixture of your work and works by others. How do you how would you characterize uh, creating a set list, or charting out what you want for a specific occasion?
Yeah. Um, I made the set lists. I usually just, figure out, what can I do, or what can me and the group do, that, really showcases all of us, equally, but at the same time, showcases like the best of us in X amount of time, whether it be 15 minutes or like 90 minutes, I guess. And we just, I usually my dad and I we sometimes do the list together. We figure out like how long the set is, and we create a list based off of that, and then we just yeah we first impression, last impression. So
Yeah,
grab everyone's attention, and then just try your best to keep that attention going. Yeah.
I don't think there's any problem with keeping people's attention in your performances.
Thank you.
So, Matthew, one of the things that I've seen about you in recent years is the work that you have been doing with Dr. Charles Lim at UCSF. And Dr. Lim is studying the effects of what music does to the mind, and how it what areas of the mind it accesses simultaneously, both as a listener and specifically as a performer. And I know that you've been working particularly closely with him. Could you talk a little bit about the work you've done together?
Yeah, you mentioned about like what his idea was, in like I think it's a really amazing idea, and like because and as far as like the process, I was um um lying down on my back, and I was on the stand, and there was a small keyboard on my lap. They were trying to stand for like how what is going on inside of my head as I'm playing a memorized piece, or just improvising in a jazz context, and even like how my brain reacts to when I'm listening to music or when I'm not listening to music. Like for example, if I go on that for a bit, if I'm not listening to music, I am like the data shows that I'm listening, but um, my it's not that much happening right. But when I'm listening to music, my according to what we found, my brain literally lights up, and I'm using my visual cortex to process everything. So.
And I think I saw a little bit of you reacting to somebody else playing a phrase, and did you play in response to that?
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it would be um, one person playing a phrase that we both know. Like they would take one half of it, one they would play one half of it, and I would play the other half, and we just go back and back and forth, and then sometimes it'll be just us improvising for a few measures, like back and forth.
And has that affected at all the way that you think about music for yourself? When you're sitting down to play on your own, no scanners, no.
Um, a good question. Um, yeah. I don't. I mean, I just find it a wait, a great experience for me. Wait, just knowing like what is going on, inside of my brain. It's a but it was a great experience working with Dr. Charles. And I hope to do it again soon.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank you for doing it, because you're actually providing the, everyone with a lot of data about this very mysterious process of what actually is happening in our brains when we are both creating music and receiving it.
Yeah,
So I'm really grateful that you are willing to do this.
thank you.
It's been a huge pleasure talking with you, Matthew, and it's an even greater pleasure to watch your performance. So
Thank
thank
you so much for the support.
I think this is the first of many performances at Cal Performances, and the next time will be in person.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.